welcome to episode 19 of The Witching Hour. I'm Perri Nemiroff, and of course, here is my wonderful co-host, Haleigh Fouch.
Hello.
There's nothing better than seeing your smiling face in the morning.
That's so nice.
The thought that we were kicking off our day, especially early today, with a recording of The Witching Hour, it genuinely makes it easier to get out of bed.
Starts the day on a good note.
Yeah. I did watch a little something before we came in today, though, that made getting out of bed a little more difficult. But we're going to get to that. We've got a very, very full show for you today. A whole bunch of things we want to talk about, starting with the Happy Death Day to You trailer. We're going to talk a little bit about the new show Nightflyers, and then I feel like many have been asking, and we're going to do it because we are finally finished with American Horror Story Apocalypse, so we are going full-blown spoiler review on American Horror Story Season 8 towards the end of the episode. You will get a spoiler warning for that one. First, though, Happy Death Day to you.
Yeah.
Okay, funny story. Haleigh comes into the office today, and she says, you know what we should cover? We should cover the Happy Death Day to You trailer. And I said, did you look at the little notes I made in our silly little Google Doc? And you know what was in there? The Happy Death Day to You trailer, because I watched it.
Simpatico.
Oh my, that trailer.
It's really good.
It's way better than I ever could have imagined it to be.
I really liked the first movie, and something about the sequel has me really excited. I guess I like mythology building and stuff like that, and it seems like a sequel that shouldn't exist and shouldn't work, but I do, from the trailer and from the interview quotes that we got from Jessica Roth, it seems like they might pull it off. It looks really cool.
Yeah, I loved the first movie also. It just has such a fun energy to it, and she's really good because she can sell the sheer terror and the frustration of the situation, but she's also really freaking funny, and I think that comes through big time in this trailer. But when they first announced another Happy Death Day, part of me was like, oh, duh, made a good deal of money. Obviously, you're going to do that, but how exactly are you going to continue that story, especially with the same characters? What I was originally thinking is that they were going to bring in a new group, and this just would have happened to someone else.
Right.
I couldn't quite figure out how they were going to make this work with the same people. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen in the final film, but this trailer does start to convince me that they've got a worthwhile way to bring these characters back, but expand this core concept.
Yeah, I agree, and she said something interesting. I think it was Christina talked to her, and I'm looking up the exact quote right now so I don't misquote her, but yeah, she compared it to Back to the Future type genre film where the sequel joins us right where we left off. It explains a lot of things in the first one that didn't get explained, and it elevates everything. That sounds really cool. And the trailer looks a little more literally like Back to the Future type stuff than I was expecting based on that quote. Like, I guess it's not the biggest surprise because it is a time loop film, but like revisiting events of the first film and stuff like that's fun and cheeky, just like the first film was fun and cheeky.
That part, though, in the trailer where she wakes up in her own loop again and is just pissed. Like, you're really great. Like, your comedy is on point, and I can't wait to see this movie now.
It's so fun, too, not to dig too much into what I loved about the first one, but I really do like seeing that awful mean girl character turned into the person you're rooting for.
Yeah. No, I'm a big fan of that as well. I mean, I really liked the entire ensemble in that first movie, so I'm excited that they're all coming back. I also am pretty pumped that this movie has a Valentine's Day release.
It's perfect.
Yeah, I think that's a really smart move, and also because now February is kind of like a hot month to make a lot of money. We're actually just talking about this on Mailbag the other day, and I was surprised that I've never picked up on this before, but now 10 out of the 12 months of the year have had a movie open with $100 million or more, which it seems crazy to me, and I just think it's only a matter of time before those other 2 months catch up. But we're pretty much at a point where a movie, especially like a really catchy movie like this, I'm not saying this movie is going to make $100 million, but movies like this can pop at any time.
Absolutely. It has been a fascinating trend over recent years to watch the release date calendar shift towards more year-round. And even it was wild this last year, like midsummer wasn't as crazy as I feel like it usually is. There was, you know, Avengers hit kind of early, Black Panther hit early. So by the time we got to the summer range, which would have usually been all the blockbusters, it wasn't quite that.
It's true. I feel like end of April and May, we got most of the big ones, also Han Solo and Deadpool. And then pretty much June was dominated by Incredibles 2 and Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. And then,
Right.
I mean, there were some movies that did pretty well after, but it feels like the summers are getting more and more front-loaded.
Yeah, it's an interesting, I don't know if it, we're always talking about this stuff and I'm always thinking about it, but like how much of it is a response to the way the industry is changing with streaming, how, you know, maybe it has nothing to do with it at all, but it is interesting to see that this, for decades, the release calendar kind of worked a certain way and just recently,
It's
kind of
true.
at the same time, it's evolving.
I mean, even if you just isolate it to the whole the Nun conversation with the first week in September, I mean, really, why? Is it streaming? Is it the different kind of content we're getting? Is it the fact that it was just something special and it itself has changed the game for that first weekend in September?
Maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's a whole different thing. Like when you try to look at the months, for me, when you try to look at the months leading up to Halloween and where you put your horror movie because it's so dense with horror content in there. And how do you know, a lot of indie films will avoid that area entirely because you don't want to go up against it.
Yeah.
So they'll come out in December or January, you know. So it's very interesting.
Well, it seems like one of the things that at least I'm coming to realize now is that really there's no bad time in the year for a horror movie because not only do we now have the first week of September, obviously we have all of October, but I think the very end, actually, I'm going to backtrack a little. The very beginning and the very end of January is now known to be a good spot to drop a horror movie. I think that Happy Death Day to You could prove that February could be a good time, especially if it's got this kind of spin on it. We've had A Quiet Place, I believe, was in April of last year and made a ton of money. Then you have movies like The Conjuring, which just blew away box office expectations right smack in the middle of the summer. I think this is a good sign for our genre.
Yeah, I mean, horror movies have always been kind of genre.
Have you not heard the Hanra story? It will follow me for the rest of my life, and I'm kind of proud of it. When we were doing Nightmares one day, you know how I either do a spoonerism or I'll combine two words? I might have just done it while we were talking before this episode started. There was one day on Nightmares where I combined the word horror and genre, and it just became Hanra, and so now it's like the cool, not so cool way to refer to the horror genre.
Makes sense to me. Yes, genre
I feel like
film.
you're not surprised at all that I did this.
No. Oh, okay. But yes, to finish that thought, like, horror's always been a little flexible. I mean, Scream, Our Love, came out at Christmas.
Yeah.
How does that make any sense? And it killed it. So, Hanra lives.
Hanra every day, all year
day.
round, and Hanra everywhere, on the big screen and on the small screen. How is that for a is a transition cool when you call your transition cool, or is it not? I don't care. Let's talk about Nightflyers.
Nightflyers.
So I think I'll let you introduce this one because you are familiar with the source material.
Yeah, so it's a novella by George R. R. Martin of Game of Thrones fame, and it's been turned into the show on Syfy, which is a tall order because it is a novella. It's very short and trim, unlike his, sprawling Game of Thrones books where they're each an enormous amount of pages and there are so many of them.
Can I ask you a question? So
Yeah.
it's a novella, but I was actually over the weekend, I was looking up the audiobook because I thought it might help me to catch up on it, but then I decided I wanted like the two different perspectives for this review. Did he expand it into another thing? Because I saw one that said Nightflyers expansion.
Maybe. If he did, I never read that one. I read the short and sweet one.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. It takes place on a ship that is, the idea is kind of like a haunted spaceship, but it's not exactly haunted. It's haunted-esque. There are spoilers that come down later that explain, but something is wrong in this spaceship that is causing it to act out against its crew. And there's all kinds of interesting stuff. There are telepaths, creepy little telepaths. I love that. There's a woman who can port into the ship.
I think she's my favorite.
Her and the telepath are my favorite. They're the most interesting.
I think we're on the same page yet again.
And then, of course, there's your regulation sort of space stuff. There's the captain. There's DeBrannon, who I can't remember what his exact job is, but he's also in charge while not being the captain.
He's like in charge of the specific mission within the ship.
Right.
Like there's the captain of the ship, and then underneath him almost is the leader of this expedition mission thing.
And so what they're trying to do, this expedition that DeBrannon is running, is there's a life form known as the Vulcan.
Why that name? All I keep thinking about is Vulcan, so I keep picturing them encountering Vulcans.
I love George R.R. Martin's writing, but a lot of the time I do think he just sort of does something familiar and twists it a little bit. Like half the names in Game of Thrones sound like they're on your spice rack, but he changed 2 vowels.
Oh no, I'm not going to be able to unhear that now. But it took me a long time into the first episode to even realize they weren't saying Vulcan. And I'm like, no way. No. And then finally, I heard someone actually pronounce the additional letters I was missing.
Yes, Vulcan. So they're trying to meet those space aliens because Earth is doomed and they want to try to save the planet. And then everything goes terribly, terribly, deadly wrong.
All right, so clearly Haleigh knows the source material. I do not, so you're going to get those 2 perspectives jumping into the very beginning of the season. There's 10 episodes overall. I believe at the point in time you will be listening to this episode of The Witching Hour, if you are listening first thing when it goes up, there are 2 episodes of Nightflyers available, with 1 more becoming available this evening. So I have watched up to episode 3. Haleigh, where are you right now?
I'm up to 5.
Okay.
And so they are, correct me if I'm wrong, they're doing the Channel Zero rollout again, right? They're doing 1 a day.
One a day, I believe.
Awesome.
Oh, I mean, actually, now that I say what could be available, I mean, is it, like midnight on the dot for the next day? So maybe people can actually be watching episode 3
now.
It's
a confusing time we live in for release dates.
Interesting. All right. All different kinds of ways to release material, apparently.
Yeah.
We'll kick it off just in case you have not watched a single episode of Nightflyers and want a general sense of whether or not you should get into it. The beginning of this conversation is going to be completely spoiler-free, so do not worry about it. My initial reaction, Haleigh, you are well aware because we have a habit now of texting each other as we go through our binge watches. I'm not all that into it. And I was really excited about this. I like the promo material that they released. I love this cast, especially Angus Sampson. I'm so excited to see him in more things. And I want to see him continue to star in, I don't care if it's a show, a movie, whatnot. He is really talented. But it took me a very, very long time, 1, to connect to what was going on, and 2, to care. I really feel like with the entirety of the first episode, I didn't care about much at all. And I also had a very difficult time understanding everything. And I know that they're going to explain the mystery as the season progresses, but I feel like you need to have something tight to hold on to. And normally that something has emotional value to it, whether it's a character that you really like that you're rooting for, or some sort of high concept to really get you into the world and what they're dealing with. And it almost just feels to me like the first, I would say, episode and a half is just waiting in this scenario that you don't quite understand. And I found that a little frustrating.
I agree. So full disclosure, on my opinion, I did visit the set in Ireland, and it was a lovely time, and I feel very lucky to have gone there. I also am a little disappointed in what we saw in that first episode. I think that one of the things they talked about on set was they didn't want to hold your hand through things. They're tired of things being over-explained to audiences, but I feel that they swung the pendulum too far in the other direction, where, like you said, you don't really have anything to hold on to. And I think a big key problem with that is that we're supposed to be invested in DeBrannon's emotional struggles, and I'm just not.
You know what I was thinking? I think he suffers from the Steve problem in Hill House.
That's funny. I mean, Vinny and I were like...
They happen to look a little bit alike, but I kept thinking about Steve and Hill House.
They're going for the same roles, definitely.
And I like them both. I think they're very talented. I had covered the crap out of this show called The Night Shift that used to air on NBC, the doctor show, and Owen Mackin was the star of that. And I visited that set twice, and he is he is really wonderful, and so was that entire cast. So I was excited to see his name pop up here, and I don't necessarily think he's doing anything wrong. It's just a matter of the way the information is being given to me about his character. I almost wish that we had spent maybe a little more time pre-Nightflyer to kind of get the lay of the land and really have a better understanding of what's affecting the world. Because the other thing is, I don't feel the urgency of their mission. And also, it isn't specifically at the very beginning even about just their mission. Yeah. It's about a bunch of other things that are happening on the ship. So I don't quite know where to put my focus.
Well, it does. The episode does in its first 5 minutes stage an interesting mystery, which is how do we get to this point where Angus Sampson is gone full The Shining, and
that opening scene was that was something else.
Yeah, I love that first 5 minutes. I can see why they released it online. It's very strong. I do think it needs a little more introduction, which is interesting because if you're expanding a very short piece of literature into a full series, why would you not want to take your time with it? Why would you rush in? That seems counterintuitive to me.
Not to harp on Hill House, but why not even take the Hill House approach and let us spend a little time with each individual character?
I think that's pretty brilliant, and probably a lot of more episodes or more episodic stories will take that approach now that Hill House did it.
Yeah, I guess so. That's just what I wish that I got. Yeah. Saying like I didn't get what I want, so I'm not happy with the show. That's not what I mean. It's more so that over the course of the first 3 episodes, I got at least something that I was very interested in with each character, and there were certain moments where I think some of the most successful scenes early on are the ones that let you just sit with someone having an emotional moment, whether they're by themselves or whether they're talking to somebody else, but where it kind of just slows down a little bit. And that's where I started to care.
Did you, trying to think of how to say this without spoiling, did you encounter, I can't remember if it's 3 or 4, any robotics in any of your episodes? Okay.
Yes, so I did like that. I liked that, but
again, I liked it.
There's still
also
questions.
A diversion as well from I feel like there's a lot of stuff like that takes away from time we could be spent actually getting to know these characters. So when I think about my 2 favorite characters, they are Thale, the telepath, who is very much a wild card. You're not really sure what to make of him at this point.
That actor is just what a name, first of all.
He's great.
He can do a lot with it. I mean, he really does encourage you, even though they do pretty much, lay out what he is, and he's very. I feel like it's pretty obvious what he. Now I'm gonna just dig myself into a hole when things surprise us, but I felt like I got a clear grasp on him from the second I met him, and then he did more with that.
Yes.
I feel like I understand what he's capable of, but obviously as the season progresses and I get more episodes, they're going to show me things that I'm never expecting.
They've taken him in an interesting direction towards the mid-season that I wasn't totally expecting, but I don't have a firm read on that character, but I do love what Sam Strike is doing with that character, and if you enjoy David Fincher's Mindhunter, he played one of the creepy killers in that, and he's very good at being a creepy killer. Or a creepy telepath, or a creepy whatever you need. And my other favorite character is Lamy.
Yeah.
Maya Eshet, I think is her name.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to say that because she was one of my favorites too. Maya Eshet.
She's the character who can port in with the ship. And it's unfortunate, though, because I do find both of them to be the most interesting characters with the most interesting abilities, the most interesting backstories, but we spend the least amount of time with them.
It's funny, the least amount of time that I think achieved the most.
Yeah.
Oddly enough. I would say the same exact thing. And as I hit episode 3, that paired with the opening of the show also made Angus Sampson as Rowan one of my favorite characters too. I really like him as a person.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, there's a moment there that I think worked really. I'm not going to spoil this yet. We're going to get there though. But those are definitely my 2 favorite characters. I think one of the reasons why I liked Lomi the most. Lomi or Lamy? Lomi.
Maybe
Lomi.
Lomi, yeah.
I'm pretty sure I kept saying Lami in my mind, and then I heard someone say Lomi. But
you know when you read a book and you decide how it's said and then you're wrong?
yes. Oh, I've been there way too many.
Yeah.
If you knew how many times that happened to me with Hunger Games, it was a problem. But Lomi, I think one of the reasons she became a quick favorite is because I think she is the very first one in the series to actually get a little meat and depth and emotional complexity to her.
Yeah.
And that is why I instantly gravitated towards her.
She also is just giving a really interesting performance. They're not really harping on it, but she's supposed to be sort of gender neutral, and she's understated, which I like. She's not really flashy in any way in her performance, at least from my perspective.
There were a couple moments where you could tell that she feels uncomfortable and awkward without doing one of the uncomfortable, awkward tropes that we often see. And I appreciated that because that instantly lets you connect to her and think, oh, well, if I was in that situation and those things are going through my mind, I would feel like that too. And maybe that's what I would do. Yeah, I liked that touch. Is there anything else totally non-spoilery that we should touch on before we jump in?
Something I'd like to touch on, which is the design, and it's interesting design of the ship, which I love what Syfy is doing on their channel. They're telling really some of the best sci-fi out there, but they have sort of come to have a sci-fi look for their spaceships. And it's interesting, having been on set, it was truly a phenomenal, extraordinary set built out across multiple sound stages where you could basically get lost on a spaceship. But it does have the sci-fi spaceship look. The one thing I think is cool about this one is it just looks like kind of trashy. Like, this is a trash ship that's barely holding together. Not that the production value looks trashy, it looks great, but the ship as it's supposed to be is very unforgiving. It doesn't have a lot of like fancy lights and good looking stuff. It seems like a ship that's being held together by like sheer force of will at this point. It's very unforgiving look to the ship.
I don't know if I necessarily took that from it. One, maybe because I'm just not well schooled in sci-fi ships, so I didn't have that familiarity, but also because I feel like one of the things that were especially weak at the beginning of the show was the geography of the ship. I have absolutely no clue where anything is in proximity to another thing. And that to me is a major, major weakness at the very beginning when I presume we're going to spend the entirety of the show on this ship. And I'm at episode 3 right now, and I can't tell you where anything is. I mean, when we start talking about the robotic element, something, even though I really liked that scene, something about it was lost because I didn't fully understand, or I wasn't fully able to grasp the possibilities out there.
That's
and
very
even
fair.
as characters are just walking from one place to another, I'm not entirely sure.
Totally fair, and I would agree. I got lost on that set in Ireland, and I am lost in it in my head still in the show.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Were you by yourself?
It's very confusing. Like, we were there all day, so there was a little bit of time to roam around and kind of check out different windows. Actually, this is a pretty funny story.
I want to hear it.
So one of the tricks they use to make the hallways look really, really long, even though they are, is they put a mirror at the end, so it looks like it's a long-ass hallway. Anyway, so the actor, Brian O'Byrne, what a delight, had a pleasure having a cocktail with him at the presser, and he is just a sassy, straightforward, no bullshit Irishman. But he was talking about how he was on set one day doing a scene, and he was walking down the hallway, and he's like, who is this fucking idiot coming into my shot? He's going to ruin the take. And it wasn't until he got to the end of the hallway, he was like, oh, it's me. It's my own reflection.
I kind of love that.
Yeah.
I was sure you were going to end that story with someone like walking into the mirror. But I guess that couldn't happen because you'd be walking into yourself.
You'd have to be real daft out there that day.
Okay, spoilery time?
Spoilery time.
All right, so we'll start talking about everything that happened up through episode 3.
Yep.
So if you're not caught up to episode 3, you might want to push pause and wait, or scrub ahead to the American Horror Story part of this podcast if you are caught up on that show. So Just because we were just talking about it, the spider robotic scene.
Yeah.
I loved the look of that, and my horror-loving heart loved, the violence and the scare and trying to hide from it. I especially felt bad for her in the end, where it's just like what else is she gonna do but hide in a corner? And then when it comes, it's got a laser that's gonna dice you up anyway.
Could kill you.
But like I felt with many scenes and little scare moments that I've experienced throughout the show so far, it was almost like kind of what's the point? I think they were making the same point that they had made many episodes, and I'm about to reveal what I think is the big reveal at the end of episode 3, which is that the captain's wife is controlling a lot of the things. Is that what I'm being?
You're close, but not quite.
She okay. All right. I'll leave it there. Okay. Well, that raises a lot of questions.
You are close, but you're
okay.
wrong on one key element.
So, all right, you could not give me any facial expressions or anything. So if that's the case, then I think maybe she is the one manipulating the individuals on the ship and torturing them with their memories and those types of things, and then the beady red eye is something else. Like the light above all the doors?
Mm-hmm. It's a theory.
Okay.
And
wow,
you told me not to react.
You're so stone-faced. I love it.
You told me not to do it, so I'm not going to. Yeah, so the reveal is certainly not to spoil further, but something is at play there that is manipulating them.
Can I just add one thing about that reveal?
Yes.
I didn't like it. And I'm not saying I didn't like it because, I don't want his wife to be in control of anything or, something that pertains to the specifics of the story. More so how the reveal was constructed. Because
the execution.
The execution of the reveal, it can't mean anything if I didn't know much about his wife before.
Sure.
Like, what was the reveal supposed to mean to me, not having any understanding of that relationship prior?
So this is probably my biggest concern about the series, and my biggest disappointment is there are so many great ideas, and so often the execution just falls short. Like I love this weird dynamic that's playing out between Melantha and Lomi and the captain, and he's creepy. And it's a very interesting love triangle that's unlike your average love triangle. But it's not being executed in a way that I find engrossing. I find the idea of it more interesting than what I'm watching. Mm-hmm. Likewise, the idea of the ship being haunted by some presence is more interesting to me than what we see play out. I feel that way consistently across the board.
So now I'm deciding it's a haunted ship with an extra layer to it, and I can't figure out the extra layer.
Watch 2 more episodes.
Another specific scene I wanted to bring up was something that I had teased earlier. It's that scene with Haleigh and Rowan with the bunny. Because normally I find all that stuff where anything bad happens to an animal very off-putting. Right. But I really liked that whole sequence, actually. How that whole thing.
One of my favorites.
Yeah. Also, even incorporating Agatha, who I find extremely dull and vanilla, but when she steps into that sequence, I like where it ends, and I think that was one of the first times that I actually wanted to think a little harder about her relationship with Haleigh in that moment.
So her relationship with Haleigh is of interest to me because I'm a freaky weird person who likes freaky weird stories. Like a little psycho telepath who's in love with his mommy figure is interesting to me. Like he's very clearly attracted to her. Oh, he's always messing with her and
I know he's always messing with her. I didn't interpret it as he is romantically interested in her.
Interesting, because that was clear to me from the first episode.
Really?
Yeah. He's got a little mommy issue, and it works for me in the story sense.
Mommy issues can mean very many things.
Yeah. He's got a Freudian mommy issue.
I picked up on the mommy issue, especially because in episode 3, I think he states it out loud at a point. Not necessarily the romantic element of it, but just his relationship with her, where she thinks that he trusts her, and he says something to suggest otherwise. But I definitely didn't pick up on that. If anything, I think I saw that spark with the bee lady more so than anything, who I find fascinating.
She's very interesting. I don't know what to make of her much at all.
I have absolutely no clue what to make of her, but I kind of can't take my eyes off of her, which seems to be the same effect she's got on all the characters around her.
Yeah, that's interesting. And maybe just having read the story, although I'm not sure how much of that Freudian stuff is there in the story, or having gone to the set, that was always in my head anyway.
Huh.
They were very coy about it on set anyway, like who's in a relationship, who wants to be in a relationship, blah, 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 blah. But to me, it just always seemed very clear that he's got some issues that are a little... He's also a very lonely person, and she's the only female that he really interacts with.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I was trying to get at in the non-spoiler section, too. What I find really interesting about that character and his performance is they basically, like, state what an L1 is, and I got very comfortable with that idea and his personality and how he behaves in front of other characters, but it's the subtleties that he adds to it through his performance, through his expression, through his body language. That's what I think adds to something that feels so sound and secure at the beginning. And it's like those baby steps that he takes all through his performance hopefully will wind up paving the way to a really satisfying reveal, unlike the reveal at the end of episode 3.
I hope so. I'm a little concerned knowing where his character goes in the original story. And I don't think... At least from what they said, they don't want to follow that story exactly. They intend to change a lot of things, and ideally, I think they'd like this to be a multi-season thing. I think the character is more interesting than what he gtes in the novella, so I'm hoping they go a little more divergent with that, but I also think he's more interesting than what he gets in these first 5 episodes, so. But the reason I even got into that was we were talking about Agatha, the Gretchen Mall's character, who is a bit vanilla, although I think she's more interesting to me. The only moments I find her extremely boring is when they're doing the her and DeBrannon stuff, and I just don't care.
It's because the two of them, I think, as characters, have the same exact problem. So when you mush and it's also, it kind of goes back to what I was saying about that feeling of waiting and nothing happening. Their conversations in particular feel so repetitive to me.
Yes.
And I just have had enough.
I kind of like, I'm not 100% successful, but I do try not to look at my phone when I'm watching screeners and stuff. Every time one of their scenes came up, I was like, what's happening on Twitter?
I mean, I can't lie. I was bored. I was, if I'm looking at my phone, it's often at IMDb, especially at the beginning, just because, it definitely took me a little bit too long or longer than I would like to get associated with all the characters and really understand who everyone is. So to have the refreshers of the name I thought was very helpful at the very beginning. But in general, I was a little bored. Yeah. And I don't necessarily mean that they needed to up the stakes, have more action or anything like that. I think it needs more gripping scenes because my favorite scenes so far were some of the quieter, more emotional scenes because those were the few scenes I was sucked into. Although I will give credit to the spider robot scene, I think that was just a well-orchestrated action sequence that I really did like. I'm trying to think of any other action-heavy ones that I was super into. Actually, here's another disappointment from episode 3, the whole moment with Mel, with her crawling to turn on or off the pump.
Yeah.
I didn't even quite understand why she was in there doing that. And if that was a moment that was going to risk her life, despite how she was engineered to be able to sustain something like that, the conversation between her and DeBrannon needed to be a little longer if I was going to feel the risk she was taking in there. You know what I mean?
I do. Yes, I think we share most of the same complaints at this point. I think that all the actors are so good.
Yeah.
And I'm a little disappointed by what they're just being given an opportunity to do, and I feel that they're being shortchanged a little bit. But I do have hope that once the show puts its cards on the table, which from what I've seen seems to be around episode 5 where they let everything out, that it can become a more interesting experience. That's my hope for it, because I think that starting your show with a mystery, saying, how do we get here, is an idea that can be fun, can be interesting. But if you drag it out too far without giving good meat in between, then it's dull.
Especially if you don't have the character development to support it. It's like the example that's on my mind right now, because I happen to have rewatched it recently, is A Quiet Place. That's a movie where they don't give you every single detail about what happened to the world and why, but that movie starts out so strong with such a strong foundation for that family, where you are immediately hooked on that family, that they can start to navigate that mystery without giving you every single answer, because you have something there. You have that thing to hold on to. And between the mystery and the lack of connection to the characters at the very beginning, I still don't have that yet with Nightflyers. And I want it. I'm reaching for it because I see the little pieces there that I want, but it hasn't quite done it for me yet.
Yeah, I'm hopeful. We'll see. I've only seen up to 5, but at that point, I do feel that they finally give you like some actual backstory on a lot of the characters, and you go, "Oh, that's what makes them tick." Huh.
Well, I'm at the very least going to get there, and maybe episode 6 to see what happens after that. But that's where we are right now with Nightflyers. Maybe we will check in the future. Maybe we won't. I don't know. We're going to find out. But right now,
wait, real quick. I did want to point out, just for any kids of our generation, that yes, the actor in the first episode who has a really bad episode is Protozoa from Xenon, Girl of the 21st Century.
I never really watched that, surprisingly. That was on the Disney Channel, right?
Yeah.
I was a little late to the Disney Channel growing up because I was a big Nickelodeon kid, and then all of a sudden, because wasn't it a thing where like you had to pay extra for the Disney Channel? And I feel like I was never exposed to it for that reason. Then all of a sudden, like, we had it once randomly and then got super into it. But I feel like that show was like right before when I switched over.
That was my jam. I was like, oh shit, it's Protozoa.
Wait, which character?
He's the one, well, we already did spoilers, so he's the one that Theo lights on fire.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That was interesting. But again, it was one of those things where even though it felt like it was something that was like little bits of it were planted along the way, didn't really have much of a build for me.
That was one that
it was like, to me, that it was only there for the purpose of the information they give you in episode 3. Like it was only done for the purpose to reveal whether or not Thale did that.
Yeah. See, that's another example of something that I find really fascinating in concept. This guy's a telepath. He's an L1. He could have done anything with his mind, but he chose with his hands to light this man on fire. That's interesting.
It's very interesting.
But it's not explored.
Exactly. All right. That's it. That's it for Nightflyers.
That's it.
For now, at least. Now we are going to move on to American Horror Story Apocalypse. We have spoken about American Horror Story before, but it was only in a non-spoiler way, and then it was at the very beginning of the season. So we're going into it right now. American Horror Story Apocalypse, Season 8, spoiler review, right now. Oh, boy.
Oh, boy.
I will start by saying I am so happy that I jumped back in. So my plan was to review and recap every single episode of the season like I have done every year. And for one reason or another, pretty much just, workload in other areas, I wasn't able to keep up with it. And I stopped watching it. And I wasn't really even liking it the first 3 episodes. There were bits that I liked, but I was far from hooked. And far from hooked like I was in other American Horror Story seasons. I am so happy I jumped back in, because the second they brought back the witches from Coven, it was like all that love I had for that group of characters from season 3 just came flooding back in. It was almost like I had never been removed from them at all, and I was instantly rooting for them after having nobody that I cared about in the first 3 episodes.
I'm so happy for you.
You feel differently.
I wish I felt that way. Yeah, when they came back, I was like, oh, well, at least I know who these people are, and I give a hoot about them. But no, I did not feel the love come rushing back, and I felt that every moment that this season relied on its previous season, it only shone a brighter light on how much the show has fallen in quality from former days. When Return to Murder House, I was like, oh, right, this show used to be good, and now they're just making jacking off jokes. Like, I don't hate this season. I don't hate the episode. There's a lot of cheesy fun to be had with it. But that episode specifically, to me, I was like, I used to be so invested in these characters' fates, and now they're kind of being played for a joke.
I mean, I didn't necessarily feel they were being played for as a joke, but that is a very valid point, because my favorite episode of the entire season was episode 6, and that happened to have been the one directed by Sarah Paulson, who I think she freaking knocked it out of the park. One, because it was so refreshing to get a contained story in a single location. And if anything, that is just yet another reminder that I really do think American Horror Story would be better off if they narrowed the focus in seasons a little more. So that's one thing. But I thought the story was great. I liked what it added to the overall apocalypse story. But what impressed me about the direction of it more so than ever is it felt like one big American Horror Story love fest. And I'm not just talking about, oh, we get all these characters that we know before, let's love them again. I'm specifically talking about the feel of the episode, the way she directs it, and the way it kind of it evokes the style and the tone of the entirety of American Horror Story. It's just like, in watching that moment, I was thinking, this is why I love this show so much, and it was that was all coming flooding back to me.
We had completely opposite reactions.
I find it very interesting.
Yeah. That's great. I'm very, very jealous.
I was very, very happy with that specific episode.
I enjoyed it, but I did feel like, like I said, I was just like, this is a show that used to honor its own stories and take itself seriously, and now it mostly just wants to tell jokes about itself.
If anything, I think the moment in the season that does exactly what you're saying now, and it does it in a way that hurts the show, is the stuff with, this was my least favorite stuff in the entire season of Apocalypse. It was with Evan Peters and Billy Eichner playing those characters, Jeff and Mutt. What was that?
I don't even know.
What was that? And I was so there at that point, so there, where they could have made it to the finish line without making me pull back and being like, what is happening to the show I love? That is the problem. That is way too big of a swing. I knew exactly who they were from the second I saw them, and they never changed. All they were there to do is to answer certain questions, and they did it in a way that wasn't all that interesting and honestly kind of annoying.
Yeah. No, that's a great example of what the show is now. That, I don't know, because even those moments, they are kind of annoying. I'm so conflicted on this season. This is going to be hard to talk about. Because the weirder it gets, the more it swings for what it is now with characters that didn't exist before. I was able to be like, this is stupid and funny. But when you put the characters that I knew before from when the show used to take itself seriously, more seriously in any case, then I found the contrast really hard to take.
I find it so interesting that we have polar opposite reads on this, because every single time I think Apocalypse got more grounded, that's when I was much higher on it. Like, some of the stuff that I liked the most, or at least the most that pertained to new characters introduced, or actually not even introduced this season, but this was really the first time we got to spend time with Michael Langdon. I thought Cody Fern was friggin' amazing in this.
Michael Langdon is probably my favorite part of the show.
They really... Also because his stuff towards the end, I think, gets, like, even though he's the Antichrist and everything, gets more grounded than anybody's, where they actually took the time to let us sit with him for a little while and not just look at him as this all-powerful being that's going to ruin things for our heroes, but to get into his mind a little and understand the complexities of him having this role and needing to fulfill this need in his legacy, but also feeling the conflict of being a young kid coming to terms with the fact that he has a drive to kill things. Then also when he gets older, being able to understand the fact that he has to do all these things that has no guidance, and him just exploring who to lean on and then not being able to lean on those people, and just seeing his growth over the course of the season was easily one of the most satisfying elements of it.
So I think in this case, we're actually sort of saying the same thing, which is that when the show took Michael Langdon seriously. It
Yeah.
didn't treat him like a joke. It treated him kind of like a tragic character.
Yeah,
ultimately.
absolutely.
And that resonated with me. I really enjoyed that. It's when it. So another example is why am I forgetting her name? The maid, Frances Conroy's character, who gets that lovely ending with her mother.
Oh my God, Myrtle.
Thank you.
I was like, no way I could forget that.
Oh no. Was it Myrtle? Not Myrtle. The maid.
Moira.
Moira. Yes.
This is the problem with having everybody come back for a bajillion roles.
Yeah. That really worked for me. That was really lovely and touching.
Yeah, it was.
And I appreciated that, and I wanted that for that character. It's the stuff where it's so hard to explain, but where they're asking me to invest with the emotions I felt for these characters before, but also treating them kind of like jokes that didn't work for me. So we saw that a lot with, honestly, how they treated the Coven half the time. Like,
really?
To me, yes. A little, especially with the additions of the new witches, it just... there was a lot of conflicting tones in there.
Okay.
Or, for example, the Harmons, the way they were treated felt very jokey to me. I also really, really don't believe that Tate deserves happiness, but maybe I'm an unforgiving bitch.
Well, he did some pretty terrible things, so I wouldn't call yourself that.
Fucking monster.
Yeah,
he doesn't deserve sweet, sweet little Violet for the rest of forever. Although, given the ending, I'm not sure that any of that stuff actually happened anyway, which comes to my biggest problem with this show is that, with this season of the show, is that it unwrote itself consistently from episode to episode. It gave us a set of stakes in the first 3 episodes, and then it said, that's not really what's happening. And then it gave us a new set of stakes, and it said, well, that's not quite what's happening. And then at the end, in the finale, it said, well, actually, none of this happened at all.
Yeah.
Because we're time traveling it out of existence. And then it said, and the time traveling doesn't matter anyway because there's a new Satan baby. So it just unwrote itself every step of the way.
And then left itself in the same exact position.
Very frustrating to me.
So when I think about it that way, and it definitely had crossed my mind, it's a very familiar American Horror Story frustration where it asks you to care about something only to undo it. And I think the worst offender still to this day, for me, is Freak Show. Freak Show really just, it ripped my heart out and it stomped all over it because that was a season where I put in many, many hours of analyzing things and coming to care about these characters just to have them all taken out in one single episode. And that felt like that felt like I was being cheated, and I didn't like that. I think I had that a lot less so here, even though that thought did cross my mind, because it brought me right back to the feelings that I had during Coven. Even when Coven kind of goes off the rails midway and towards the end, and actually this goes back to the conversation with Nightflyers. I think you can get away with a lot more when you have a group of characters that you genuinely want to spend time with and you genuinely want to see how they operate in any given situation. And I think that's what all of a sudden gripped me in Apocalypse and took me through to the end, where even if it does mean unwriting everything that happened in the season, they got me to root for them so hardcore down to Coco and Mallory. And Coco was driving me nuts the first 3 episodes.
Coco surprisingly was pretty fun.
I thought that the moment the two of them have where they realize that they're going to have to, get rid of their current personalities and someone's going to have to be mean to each other, that conversation to me was one of the best in the entire season because it almost brought me to tears, and that's after hating who they were earlier in the season. So that's a moment that I found really interesting. But, in the end, when I isolate it to just thinking about American Horror Story Apocalypse, I am very, very satisfied with where this left me off. When I think about what that means for American Horror Story overall and the continuity between seasons and what it leaves us with for future seasons, if future seasons are to connect to this, that is problematic.
It's so fair, and I know a lot of people really love this season, and I'm very, very happy that people felt satisfied. I truly did not, and maybe if I rewatch it, I'll feel differently.
You never know.
Maybe. I just constantly felt like I was being jerked around in the wrong direction for no freaking reason, and ultimately it didn't mean anything at all. So an example is to say the end of Return to Murder House, which seeks to give us resolution for the characters. It offers, I can't think of the word right now, but, it's trying to give you a happy ending, essentially, for these characters. So it wants you to feel that resolution and then still be content to have it taken away in the finale when they time travel everything out of existence. I don't feel that you can have it both ways.
I definitely don't think you can have it both ways when you really think about it, which is, I think it's just something I've come to terms with American Horror Story, is that it's almost just a ride. And the further we get into this series, the more things kind of, one, rewrite themselves, two, lose meaning because of something that happens within the show itself. And it's almost like I've kind of thrown out the window the idea of being able to have these things stack on top of each other, because I'm going to constantly, I'm going to constantly drive myself crazy trying to line everything up.
But within one season, I'm not talking about the whole continuity of the whole series. I'm talking about what they did in this single season.
Within this single season, I still left feeling pretty happy with what we got up until the very, very end. I think if anything ran the risk of tipping that scale for me, it was the reveal of another Antichrist, and also what they did with Timothy and Emily, which was pretty much what I was worried about from the very beginning. You had kind of hinted at this for me, but I knew they were coming back. I knew they were going to come back, and I knew they were going to mean nothing to me because of how weak they were at the beginning of the season. And that is exactly what happened. And then the addition of if anything, I wish that they didn't show that there was another Antichrist.
Yeah.
I think that would have changed the game quite a bit.
It might have. That is the ultimate exclamation point on none of this mattered anyway. Like, the story we were telling wasn't worth anything, ultimately.
I can't argue against that. The only thing I can say about it is, even though in the end it meant nothing, the journey along the way for me was so entertaining and enjoyable. Yeah. And I mean, really, like, filled with warmth. That's part of the reason why I gravitate towards the Coven, because it's that sisterhood, that love and dedication they have for each other is palpable to me. And even though, technically it wound up meaning nothing in the end, and a lot of the stuff we saw, most of it, all of it was erased, I still had that feeling while I was watching it, and that's where the value comes from for me.
That's fair. I guess I'm more attached to Murder House than Coven, as we've discussed in previous episodes. So not to harp on it, but I'm going to be really annoyed forever that they tried to be like, here's a nice ending for Moira, psych, it doesn't exist. That sucks. That really sucks to me. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm not satisfied. I wasn't satisfied. The only parts of the season I enjoyed the most was when it leaned into its own camp of the current circumstances without undermining the value of its previous seasons. Those were when I had the most fun with it, which to a lot of people were the most annoying parts. When it was funny and new, it was interesting to me. When it was trying to have it both ways, it was not successful for me.
Okay. Question for you, because we do have to wrap up. Given what went down in American Horror Story Apocalypse, what are your hopes for the next season?
Different. Tell me a different story. Leave the past alone. That's what I would like.
I think even though I had the reaction that I did, you know what? And I feel like I've had this conversation where I've said the same thing multiple times and it never happens. Give me a contained story with a small group of characters that is something all on its own.
That's
all
what
on
I
its
want.
own. I will say I really did enjoy the callback to Hotel, though, and
that was good.
That was probably one of the best things, because in Hotel, when Queenie died, I got mad. I'm like, no way. So the fact that they resolved that the way they did made me super happy.
I did enjoy that episode quite a bit, actually. I don't hate the whole season. There are parts of it. It's just overall I found it self-defeating and disappointing. But I do like, my favorite season in a really long time was Cult, which was a self-contained season.
No, it's true.
And it of course went off the rails. That's what the show does.
Yeah.
But it was, to me, the most close to being complete and concise that the show had been in a long time.
It goes back to the same thing that I've said a ton of times this episode. It had a strong group of core characters.
Yeah.
Like, it almost didn't matter what crazy things they went through and heightened things that are maybe difficult to wrap your mind around. But that family, that initial family unit stayed so strong and hooked you so early that you were able to take bigger swings. When you don't have that, that's when it's impossible to do that.
It's always tough with this show. I'm always in a bad mood by the season finale.
Aww.
No, really, by the finale.
I know.
It's, except for maybe Murder House, I've never reached the finale and been like, oh, they really stuck it.
Yeah. I guess I can't. I have to say the same exact thing. I think Murder House is the only one that's strong all the way through. I think some elements of Asylum are exceptional, but that was one that was all over the place, which makes me like it a little less than most people do. I feel like most say that's their favorite.
I do like Asylum a lot.
Yeah, Coven got me with the characters, and then, I mean, Cult almost got there. And I still think Cult had a good ending. It was just what it was playing with in the last few episodes with true crime. That's where I think it really started to kind of lose its focus a little. But give me something super simple and focused and contained in the new season.
I also want to see the show really return to actually exploring subgenre instead of exploring up its own ass. Because it was more fun when it was like Murder House, Coven, Asylum. We're playing with different horror tropes in really weird ways instead of like now we're just playing with ourselves. Like
No, I get it. All right. That's it. That's what we thought about American Horror Story
guys,
Apocalypse.
I wish I liked it more and was happier.
No, don't be sorry. I mean,
I just hate to be a negative voice when so many people loved it, but it didn't work for me.
Well, it's your voice and it's your opinion and it's valid. Everyone's going to have a different reaction, especially when we're talking about a show as crazy as American Horror Story. Haleigh, thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thank you out there to everybody who is listening. Again, we love doing these shows, and we are so happy that you are here with us. So if you know someone who doesn't have some witching hour in their lives, tell them about it. Tell them they can watch us on the YouTube Collider podcast channel, and tell them they could find us right here on the Collider Factory feed on iTunes and Podcast One. Haleigh, where can everyone find you on the internet?
You can find me on Collider.com, where we will have a number of interviews rolling out. Yeah, definitely a lot of content coming all the time, but specifically for Nightflyers, I've got like some ridiculous 8 interviews coming up. You can find me on Twitter at Haleigh Fouch, and you can find me on Instagram and look at all my pictures of my cats at Haystack McGroovy.
That is an important thing that you should do. And after you do that, if you need even more cats, you could find Dewey on my Instagram at PNMRF, which is also my Twitter handle. And I will reiterate, there is so much great end-of-the-year content in the works over at Collider.com. Keep looking. Look out for Haleigh's Nightflyer interviews, and then keep an eye out the rest of the month for all that stuff. We're also cooking up some fun stuff here at Collider Video as well. So lots to keep you entertained through the end of 2018. So thank you all so much for listening. You've officially survived the witching hour.